This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
Shavaun Scott, Hidden Killers contributor, psychotherapist, author, all-around just good, smart human being, is with us right now. We're talking about Negasi Zuberi. Very reminiscent of the television show You in some ways. Have you seen that on Netflix?
I have.
That was the first thing that came to mind when I saw the cell that he had created in the basement of his rental home where he had kept a woman, one that we know of thus far. How likely is it that this is the only person that he had attempted to hold captive? Do you think there's more to this than just this one crime?
Yeah, this is clearly a very scary guy. And it's likely, as I believe the FBI believes, that there are other victims in other states. Now, this may be an escalation of, it seems bizarre that you build a cell in your garage when you live there with a female partner and children, so this shows again, wow, this is a bizarre degree of boldness that this person has progressed. And so it may be that this is the first attempt to hold someone, or there may be other cases where he held someone just very briefly and then murdered them. It'll be fascinating to see how this plays out. But man, this guy is really scary and quite bold.
How do you approach understanding the potential psychological factors that contribute to something that, like Negasi Zuberi is alleged to be involved in the murders and other violent crimes? To be able to go down the road and do something like this, when you heard about this story initially, what was going through your mind about this person?
The incredible boldness. He drove about 6 hours up to Seattle, Washington, where he picked up this woman who was a sex worker, and he handcuffed her and convinced her that he was an undercover cop and he was arresting her, got her in the car, and then drove 6 hours all the way back to his home in Southern Oregon and put her in this cell in the garage when he has a female partner living in the home, has children living in the home there. There are neighbors, this was not a completely isolated place, even though it's a somewhat rural area in a small town. That struck me as, just a very unusual degree of boldness with this guy. And if he's this bold in this way, what other things has he done?
We look at it going, how did the partner that was in the house, maybe neighbors, if they saw it, how did no one know anything or say anything, not raise a red flag? Or is this another case of, like we've seen with Rex Heuermann, allegedly, do you think the partner was just that demoralized, that beaten down, that they're not going to question any sort of odd behavior out of their partner, no matter how scary it might be?
It's a real curiosity. Most of the time, with serial killers, the partner doesn't know. And very often they have absolutely no clue. And it's my guess with Herman's situation, that's the case with his wife. That's what they've said, that they had no idea, the wife and the kids. But the killer is not taking the victims to the residence, right? So that's a big difference in this case. And there are cases where partners have known and to some degree colluded. They've allowed it to happen and allowed it to happen on the premises. So I would be talking a lot with this woman that he was living with to try to ascertain if in fact she was aware of what he's done and if she's aware of other things that he's done in the past. She was with him during the times that he was prosecuted for other sex crimes. And one in 2016, he was convicted of a sex crime against a minor. Yeah. So obviously this was not a rule out for her with being with this man. And I would be looking at her very closely.
Yeah. If you're going to be staying with, that's one of the things that baffles me all the time, is someone who stays with their partner, even though they've been convicted of sexual crimes against other people, even more so. Like, what on earth are you thinking? I think it just kind of comes down to abuse to a certain extent and control, and not people, when you're in that moment and you're in the cycle of abuse, you don't necessarily realize just how bad things are unless you're actively participating in the crimes themselves. It seems to be one or the other.
Yeah. Sometimes I think there are women who have gone along and cooperated to the point of being actively involved in the crimes, but
Sure.
that's really rare. But I would be looking at that in this case. The whole thing is just really weird and creepy.
What does it say to you about his appearance being on Judge Judy? I mean, this is something you have to actively seek out. You don't just get assigned, and by the way, your case is going to Judge Judy. That's not how that works. He actively had to seek out to be on that television show to talk about being hit with a bottle by the mother of his children. He was arrested in that incident. But again, we're talking about getting national spotlight on yourself for a crime. It doesn't necessarily look all that good. Does that speak to the grandiosity of an individual like this?
100%. He wanted to be on TV. And I've heard from other people who knew him in media interviews that he was known as a con artist. And he thinks he's smart. He probably found it quite entertaining. And, they got some money out of the deal, apparently.
What does it say about his multiple identities over different states? We don't always see that where people are literally changing their identity to seduce or entice other people into going along with them. Certainly from time to time we do, but it doesn't seem to be the most common thing. Is that just part of his strategy for manipulating people and staying off the radar? Or does that speak to something deeper? Is he identifying as different individuals, almost reinventing himself every time he goes and commits crimes as a different person?
Yeah, my impression was that his identity is pretty consistent with conning people. And you will find this with some criminals, depending on the ability that they have to come up with new names and move around the country. And apparently he would move into places and then not pay the rent and would go through this long process of being evicted. So it kind of sounds like somebody who's just overall, he's not living a life as an upstanding citizen. He's basically committing crime after crime of all different sorts of crime. And by just having the ability to move around at will like this and change his name, it's just a way of eluding capture and staying one step ahead of the law.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Brueski.